Hey, welcome Next Oriente, the new voice of Brotherhood. It is me, Eric Diamond,
And me, Jason Van Dyke.
and it's been a while since we did a live
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
I think the last time we were live was mid-January.
Oh,
That sound that
maybe.
sound right?
Could be.
Yeah, it's funny. So at the end of January, I went to Las Vegas and came back with conference crud. Uh,
Yep.
as one, it was funny because it was the week after CES, which is notorious, like from an immunological perspective, is probably like the worst time to go
Yeah.
to
Right. Totally.
to anywhere. And
Yep.
I picked up the flu, which really made me angry because I religiously take a flu shot
Yeah.
pretty much as
Right.
soon as they're available.
Not a guarantee, buddy.
And yeah, and this time
More of a guess.
there was one of those what is it?
SARS. Bird
No,
flu.
it could have been, but it was the type B, which is like
Right.
the strain that they didn't stick in the
Right.
virus in the the vaccine.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so yeah, and that was really nasty. I'm definitely one of those guys who gets like man cold,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Where I just
Uh-huh.
become a complete mess. And
Sure.
so I was down. I was down
Yeah.
for like 2 weeks, and then
Yeah.
every time now, now that um I'm elderly distinguished kind of guy, um
Right.
right, I always get a sinus infection afterward. And so I had that. And it's funny, I haven't edited the show yet because I've been so
Mm-hmm.
like just exhausted. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't really had a chance, but we did a show, a really interesting show.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be actually episode 137, which is you and I and Joseph Wages, who translated the Illuminati.
Ritual.
He edited
No.
the
Right.
Illuminati, the
Sure.
original Illuminati rituals. We went to Gadsby's
So cool.
Tavern in
Yeah.
Alexandria and did a show, recorded a show there, which will be audio only. We didn't do video just because we were
Right.
in a public restaurant, and
Yeah.
people get
Got it. Would get weird. Yeah.
yeah.
And then I got the crud after that. And so I had a brief sickness right after that. So that night, because the next night was supposed to be Union 6, was that House of the Temple, which I was
Right.
all excited for. It was going to be a lot of fun. And then I got sick, and then got better pretty quick. I thought I got better, and then I was off to the conference of Grand Masters, and got had horrible sinus pain the night before I was supposed to get on the plane. And I was like panicking because I was like, oh my god, if I get on this airplane with this amount of sinus pain, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry in public, and people are just gonna question my manhood. It's gonna be terrible. And so fortunately, took a fistful of Advil, and I was fine. And then got to the conference and played this game of Am I Sick or Am I Not Sick a few times,
Yeah.
and I sort of powered through it. And then we came back, and I was going to go. Was when I got back from the conference of Grand Masters, Kristen had had the week off of work for a winter break, and so she said, "Well, we're gonna go to a spa." And so we went with a couple friends to a spa, actually about an hour away, hour and a half away, on the eastern shore of Maryland. And we got there. I got one night, and then woke up the next day and was like, nope, full blown bronchitis, down for the count, like just awful, horrible, sick. Had to go to the walk-in clinic finally, and then so I just got right. Just finished my week-long course of antibiotics, and I feel great.
It's funny, you don't really think about it, but like, when you're sick and you're lying in bed and stuff like that, that's one thing, right? But even when you're in that
Sure.
recovery mode, I was coughing so much, like I couldn't in good conscience come on the air and be like, put it this way, I'll still probably cough
Sure.
during this,
So will I.
there you
In
go.
fact, just thinking about
Right.
it makes me cough. Yeah. I feel
Um,
exactly the same way.
but we're super glad to be back. And This is kind of a looser show than, normally we we
Sure.
do lots of research and read
Right.
lots of documents and stuff like that. But this time,
This will be more anecdotal.
more a little bit more anecdotal. So before we get into kind of like how your week was,
Sure.
something that I kind of got turned on to by some guys at Masonic Week, something that I was
Mhm.
able to do. So I went ahead and I got myself this, right?
Oh yeah,
And
there you go. Right.
and what this is this is made of zirconium ceramic, and it has an NFC chip built into it, right? And so what I was able to do with this is, for those people who are familiar with Amity, right? The guys at Amity are developing this thing they're calling King Solomon's Pass. And so the idea is that you go to this website, it's a web app, and you go to this website, and it's basically kind of like a dues card. But instead of just having your dues card, what they're doing is they've got some kind of technology API hook or something like that into some of these Grand Lodges, and they basically can look up when you call when your browser calls up the URL, right? It goes out to the technology that's running the databases of these Grand Lodges, and all it does is just tells you, are you in good standing or not? So it's cool because it's actually fresher than an actual dues card, than a physical dues card.
Sure. Absolutely.
And
It's by the minute.
right. And it shows you all the different lodges you belong to. So I belong to 3 different lodges in 3 different states. And so it'll tell me like what, it just brings up my Amity profile, which is really, really cool. And so it occurred to me, I'm like, this is kind of cool because this is the first functional Masonic ring. This is the first Masonic ring that actually does something,
Yeah.
And so
totally.
I thought that, and these run about, so this is made by a company. It's called NFC Ring, and they're out of the UK, and these run about $50, for the nice ceramic
which is hardly anything.
It's hardly anything, and you can also do other cool things with it. Like, for example, you can put your contact information, right? So if you're in a business setting and stuff like that, you don't want to, like, who uses business card? I mean, we use business cards when we go to Asia, like we'll present business cards because it's like a ritual.
Absolutely.
But otherwise, you're at a Masonic conference or something like that, and you want to give somebody your contact information. This is a great way to do it because you can just, you just swipe it. Basically, so what this thing is like the chip is in the ring, but then wrapped around the ring, embedded into the ceramic, is like basically an antenna. And so this thing runs. It's kind of like RFID. So you just kind of get near your phone. Put it to the back of your phone if your NFC is turned on, which it is. If you have a later model iPhone,
Apple Pay. Apple Pay.
It works. Like, I think you have to have a 10S or better.
Yep.
And it just automatically reads it. Otherwise, you have to use a little app that will read it, or like a Samsung phone with Samsung Pay, and you just kind of hold it over the thing, and it just comes right up, and so that's like super cool. And the best part, you don't have to worry about points in or points out, right? Because there's no points in, there's no points out. It's just a band. But I thought it would be kind of cool, like, maybe someone could be clever and figure out a way to like engrave some Masonic symbols on it and stuff like that. So
totally. That's pretty cool.
I thought that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So yeah. And it's just because the thing is like when you use that Amity thing, it's just a URL.
Yeah.
Right? So you're just calling up a URL.
Yeah, totally.
So that's what makes it kind of cool.
That's
and
amazing.
then the other thing that was interesting is and they're it's not fully implemented yet, but they're adding appendant bodies also to your profile page. So it'll tell you, if you're a member of the Scottish Rite, it'll tell you you're in good standing there. If you're a member of the, I don't know all the different bodies that they're going to eventually do, but I think as they're able to do it, So Joe Crociata is here. Hi, Joe. Joe Crochet is here, and he says functional but pointless. Yeah, it's probably a little bit pointless, but actually, it's funny. There are plenty of times where there's a lot of especially among younger guys, like younger millennials, where like I'll have to text my contact information to somebody else, or
Sure.
like they'll hand me their phone and say, here, type in your contact info. This is just like this literally happens instantly. So it's kind of a cool.
Right.
Cool
For
thing.
Joe, this reminds me of Eric and I both have the same affinity for luggage. And we both have a German luggage. And mine has a piece of technology on it. It actually has a Gorilla Glass thing on the side of it with it is e-ink inside of it. And so if you fly on Lufthansa, only Lufthansa does this, by the way. They try to get other people, but only Lufthansa. If you fly in Lufthansa, they'll put your bag tag in that little e-ink reader so they don't stick anything on your bag, which is a complete novelty. It's ridiculous. Other than that, I have a really nice name tag, basically, because I can put a picture on it. For the most other times that. So it kind of reminds me of that a little bit, which is useful, but only in very specific situations.
Yeah. But you could do other
Sure.
other things, like you could store your entire obligation on that. Like you could do all kinds of crazy things, like not that I would,
Right.
but
Sure.
it just it's
Sure.
something to play with.
It is something to play with. That's
so
fun.
so moving along,
Yeah.
let's talk about where you talked about the Conference of Grandmasters.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so was it last week? The week before, the Conference Grandmasters in North America. Essentially, what the meeting is that all the Grandmasters in North America get together for a session of what I call weaponized boredom. But they sit together in a room and listen to presentations from various independent bodies and other people who have business in front of the Grandmasters. The big thing that's happening kind of simultaneously to the Conference Grandmasters, there's also a Conference Grand Secretaries, but the big thing that's happening is that the Conference of Grandmasters Committee on Recognition also meets. And so foreign Grand Lodges that want to be recognized by Grand Lodges in the United States come to this committee, make presentations to the committee. The committee then sort of does their investigation of their Grand Lodge and then makes a recommendation. They don't speak for the Grand Lodges, but they can make a recommendation to Grand Lodges like, yes, we've looked over their paperwork. We find it, credible and yes, and regular, and we recommend that we give recognition to this Grand Lodge.
Yeah. So
or
how
they
does that
say
work? They get up and they give a
a presentation.
Here's why you should recognize
exactly.
us.
Yep, they give a pitch. There are criteria of what a recognized Grand Lodge is, which I don't know off the top of my head, but it's actually very, very simple. What they need, but they kind of make a pitch and they say, here's how we hit those criteria, and this is why we want you to recognize us, or give the recommendation to recognize us. So that's kind of all happening, and then there's a huge Masonic marketplace.
Do they like vote on it there? I mean, do they?
They do. Well, they have a report that comes out afterwards. They do vote. Committee. I think the committee then gets together and they make a recommendation. This year there wasn't too much going on in that committee. I think there were only a few that were there. Yeah, it's information, right?
Yeah,
that's absolutely accurate.
Yeah, so Joe made a comment. It's the Committee on Information for Recognition. Nothing
right.
empowers them to make a recommendation.
Right. There you go. That's exactly it.
Well, they make a recommendation. Wait,
they do.
They make a recommendation, but they're not empowered to recognize. Right.
No, not at all. It's just a recommendation from the committee. They're giving a helping hand. They're helping Grand Lodges do that first step of due diligence, and say, yeah, well, this stuff is in order. We've all sat around and talked to them. You do what you want. Here's our recommendation. So that's kind of going on. They've got a huge Masonic marketplace.
And did anybody show up this year? I mean, like, were there any Grand Lodges that?
There were a couple, but it wasn't anything. I don't think anybody got a recommendation this year.
Oh, okay.
I think there were very few that were there to make their pitch.
I mean,
I think there were
you've
only
been to
3 or
this
4.
is like what your 15th that you've attended.
No, this is of Conference of Grandmasters. So I've been going to these conferences like this, national big conferences like this for 15 years. But this is my 3rd or 4th. I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
Conference
Would
of
you say like
Grandmasters.
in your time in going to these things? Because I'm nowhere
Sure.
near a grand
Yeah.
anything, so I
Yeah.
don't go to these.
Right.
Would you say that there are more no's than yeses
I don't know.
in terms of these?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not really part of that circle of that stuff that's happening. I'm more in the marketing things, the numbers things, the professional stuff. That stuff is grand officers. That's grand masters, grand secretaries, grand what would they be? They would be grand chancellors. That's their kind of a deal. So I'm not. I know what happens, and I hear things about that committee, but not part of it. The committee I'm part of is the Masonic Renewal Committee.
Oh.
And so we meet at the conference as well. Yeah. So this year the Masonic Renewal Committee put on a couple programs. We had Linda Patch came and talked to us from Scottish Rite Northern Masonic Jurisdiction. She is their director of communications and marketing. And she's the one behind Not Just a Man of Mason. And then this year, the big announcement to the main conference Grand Masters, and then they kind of had separate sections for the Conference of Grand Secretaries and Masonic Renewal, which was their big rollout of beafreemason.org. And that's probably the biggest thing that happened during the conference was this rollout. And beafreemason.org, go visit now. What is beafreemason.org is it's a landing spot basically for people looking for information about becoming a Mason. And it's a landing spot that's been developed and paid for by the Scottish Rite Northern and Southern jurisdiction and the Shrine. All 3 cooperated with this thing, put all of their power behind it. And essentially what it is that they've come to the realization that they're appendant bodies, that they live and die by Master Masons. You know, they have to have a population from which to recruit from. Mm-hmm. And so it benefits them to have more Master Masons. So they've developed this landing page. Behind the landing page is a lot of search engine optimization, SEO for those in the know. And they have leveraged all of the power that they can from Google and Facebook and the big giants of online marketing to pump up this website to try and make this the number one the number one result if you're online looking for information about Freemasonry. And beafreemason.org, the big thing that it does is that as you kind of learn a little bit about Masonry in a general way, if you want to become one, you can go to, hey, I want membership information, and you can click on it and it will send you, depending on where you live, to your Grand Lodge. Send that lead, for lack of a better word, to the Grand Lodge. And the Grand Lodge then needs to follow up on that and see if it's something that works out and that you become a member. But it's a really powerful tool.
So how is this different than other sort of general Masonic sites? Because pretty much like any, if you go to like Paul Bessel's site and so
sure.
Any of those other sites always have if you're interested, absolutely. Right.
Again, the big key is the SEO. It's the search engine optimization behind it. It is the work that they do behind the scenes. Number 2 on that is these people are going to be typing in information about themselves to then transmit. The other thing that they were able to leverage, especially from the Shrine, is information security. So the Shrine has a lot of experience keeping this information safe because they run hospitals. And so they have to, they have to have these really high standards for information security. So they've actually implemented that as well in the back end of this thing. Again, it's a very, very simple front. If you look at beafreemason.org, it doesn't seem like it's a heck of a lot, but what lies behind it is very, very powerful. What you're seeing is literally the tip of an iceberg, and it's a very big and expensive iceberg. So it's really, really cool, and hopefully it works out for everybody.
And do you know, is there going to be like an ad campaign that promotes the site? Like, how are people going to?
Well,
is it simply SEO?
It's simply SEO at this point. It is supported by the Not Just Amanda Mason campaign, to which they've shot a couple of new things apparently, and they've got new materials that are on their way. But it's supported by that. If you look at the branding, it completely matches Be a Freemason and Not Just Amanda Mason. Completely matches. So it's all kind of the same thing. But it's a pretty big deal. It was really, really interesting what they're doing, and it's nice to have the support, from a Grand Lodge perspective, I think. Yeah, so that's the big one, right? What else?
And how was that received? Like, how did that?
I think fairly positively. I think that there will be inevitable issues with it. I mean, it's all brand new. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. But I think overall and in general, it's a super positive thing. You're giving, you're helping Grand Lodges with the one thing that they need the most, membership. We all need membership to survive. And so this is just another pipeline for us. And the thing is, we don't have the money to do SEO. Even in DC, I mean, DC is we're a tiny jurisdiction with 3,000 guys. We don't have the marketing power that the Grand Lodge of California does. Right. But even the Grand Lodge of California probably is going to try and, I mean, they're going to have to make a choice, right? and they're going to have to see some ROI.
I can tell you just from my experience as a marketer, SEO is not for the faint of heart. Like, it's not one of those things.
Yeah, that's
like,
right. No,
we're going to have an SEO committee, and
right.
Get a couple of guys, what they're doing on Google. No, it doesn't really work that way, because basically what's happening is that every the algorithms that Google uses change all the time, because people try to game it, and it's an arms race. So basically the people who are doing SEO are trying to kind of game it, and Google's changing it to adjust, and they have to kind of know what the changes, and they don't publish it. They don't tell you, we changed this part of the algorithm. It's all a dark art,
It is.
So
it totally is.
So that's exactly expensive. To hire those experts it's really expensive.
Absolutely right. And it is the most apt description of it is a dark art. I mean, because it is an art 100%. I mean, you really do have to know what you're doing technically behind the scenes, but it's an art, because you're playing cat and mouse with a gigantic corporation that doesn't want you to have what you're trying to take.
Right.
Really interesting. So yeah. So I mean, it's a really, really big deal. The other thing that Masonic Renewal did is that they had Brent Morris from the Southern Jurisdiction. He's the editor of the Scottish Rite Journal. He's the director of communications for the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction. He came in and gave a presentation about membership numbers and just sort of big, broad numbers on trends that he sees. He had a poor intern at the House of the Temple who went back and took every single proceeding from every single Grand Lodge in the United States, and then transcribed all the numbers from all of those proceedings from whatever the beginning of any proceeding that they have all the way to, I think, 2015. So it's this giant data set that he has. And he had some really really interesting things. One is the one big interesting find is that and I'd heard this in other place before, but he also confirmed it, which is that 1-day classes are more effective than you think they are, which I find just, I was gobsmacked actually.
Really?
Yeah. So it turns out there's about a 53% retention rate for 1-day classes, as opposed to 48% retention rate at a normal pace. Right?
Really?
How do you feel about that?
I'm gobsmacked.
There you go. Exactly. So yeah, it's a big deal. And so the Grand Lodge of Ohio.
Wait. Back up.
Yeah.
Why do you suppose that is?
So here's the interesting thing. So the Grand Lodge of Ohio was instrumental in this. So Ohio, for those of you who don't know, is ginormous as far as masonry is concerned. The big Masonic districts, as one could guess, are New York, Florida, Texas, and California. But what you don't know is that Ohio is right there up with them. I think Ohio is 60 something thousand Masons. And so Ohio also runs 1-day classes once or twice a year as a Grand Lodge. They sponsor this thing. And they really wanted to know, honestly, like, do these work? Should we keep doing these, or are we just spinning our wheels? Because everyone tells us that this is terrible and looks down on us and tells us what awful people we are. And so they said, let's get some numbers and let's figure this out. And if
I'm
if it's true,
guilty of that myself.
right. Me too. Absolutely. And so they said, let's look at this. And it turns out that, it's slight, but it's significant that there is better retention for a 1-day class.
And do we know how they define retention? Is it like 5 years out, or?
I think it's or 3 years out, I think. At any rate, the important thing is that it was a really controversial thing. Even there, like, people were like, no, that can't be right, or like, no, I mean, that's just silly. The way that they've kind of explained it, which was interesting to me, was they think that what happens is that really busy professionals really only have that 1 day to devote to this. They want to come to Lodge, they want to do stuff, but they're not going to do it very often, right? Maybe they're going to get to Lodge a handful of times a year. And they've really got 1 day to really devote to the process of becoming a member. And so that's it. And they say, so maybe that's it. So what do you got there? I can't.
So Jay Hochberg, Ohio pioneered the modern 1-day class circa 2002, bringing in 7,000 new members in a day.
Yeah. That's right.
We've done shows where we've criticized that. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. That's mind blowing. And I've always assumed that those 7,000 members are walking in the front door and 6,999 are walking out the back. Right? Turns out not true. So at any rate, so there you go. So that was a big thing. Brent also brought up a really cool number that I had heard earlier in the day. He brought up a number that he called throughput. And it was sort of his canary in the coal mine, as it were. And his throughput number is how many guys who get their EA in the space of 1 year then matriculate to Master Mason, right? Mm-hmm. That's your throughput. From one end to the other, that's your throughput. And he shows that number is going down. And right now, where it traditionally has hovered at, I want to say in the 70s of percent, right? So 70%-ish. Right now, he said it's at about 68, 67. But during his presentation, I thought, I just heard that number. And I had just been in a presentation that Grandview, which is a big membership database company, who now has, I think, 25 or 35 of the Grand Lodges in the United States. They were doing their presentation on, kind of upcoming things and what they're working on. Well, Grand Lodge of Ohio, the Grand Lodge of California, Grand Lodge of Texas are all clients of theirs. And so they've got this ginormous, I think 500,000 Masons are in their databases. And so they ran numbers like this because they were curious about this sort of number too. They called it completion, but they added a little twist to it. What Jeff Clark of Grandview did is that he ran, all right, when you get the EA, what's the rate that you become a Master Mason and then stick around for 2 years after? Okay. What's that rate? And that completion rate, it's way lower than 68% that Brent was talking about. The average is probably somewhere in the low 60s, high 50s. So think about that. And so we had a conversation about this. Like, first of all, I freaked out at Brent's thing and I went, oh my God, I got to get you two together, because Brent was using big numbers that are basically totals that he had gotten from proceedings. And I thought, my God, you get together with Jeff Clark. He's got the actual raw data. He has the by member data, which is just invaluable. So I said, well, let's put the two of you together in a room and talk, and let's see what trouble we can make. Let's talk real big data and what we can do with it. And so they talked for a long time, really got into it and said, oh my God, we really need to do something together and really push these numbers and figure out what's going on. Anecdotally, we started talking about it and sort of figured one big thing, I think, is that a lot of Grand Lodges don't allow their lodges to open on the EA, right? You can't do business, open or do business in your lodge on the entered apprentice degree. You have to do it in the Master Mason degree, right? Well, you've alienated a guy that you just initiated.
Right.
You initiate a guy, you say, yeah, you're part of the club. Come back in a year when you're a full member of the club.
Yeah, Illinois changed that. I want to say like 10 years ago. No.
That's exactly right. And so I'd heard that. I'd heard a couple other places that have changed it as well. And I've heard some people say, well, we have to do business on the Master Mason degree, but we can walk it down to it. So there you go.
So Joe Crociata has another interesting comment. Sure. He said the Grand Lodge of DC began one-day classes in 1993. Retention rate as judged by dues payments has always been roughly comparable with lodge-based degrees. I've seen no study that evaluates active Masons on any other basis.
No, I
think that's always been the case. I mean, Chris Hodap is famous for standing up and saying, I was a one-day Mason myself, and
that's absolutely right.
Here's what is interesting and troubling to me. It's the 48% number. It's the fact that guys who like.
So again, if you shut a guy, Eric, if you shut a guy out of your lodge, if you say, hey, welcome to the club, and they go, that's great, I can't wait to sit down and be part of the club, and then you go, well, yeah. When I said welcome to the club, I meant welcome to this part. You really can't sit in a meeting. You can't actually be part of the club for another 6 to 8 months, and then then you can be part of the club.
Does that
that's explain, a bait and switch?
Does that explain? No, it absolutely is. And in fact, one of the things that we've done in my mother lodge, and this is super important. I mean, first of all, even before Illinois changed the rules, we got dispensation to open on the first degree so we could include them. We make sure that whenever we have a lodge program, like an education program, unless there's a reason for it to be tiled, we will close the lodge and then invite them upstairs so that they can be part of that. But then also we make sure that there are activities and discussions and things like that.
There you go. Right. Absolutely.
To keep them engaged.
In DC, we open and do business on the entered apprentice degree. And I think that's a huge reason why. Here's where I get to toot our own horn. From the numbers that I was looking at, Washington, D.C. is actually number one in both numbers. We throughput, our completion rate is in the high 80s, low 90s. And the Brent's simpler number, we're way higher than that. We're well, I think 98% who get their EA, get their Master Mason. So there you go, Washington, D.C., the place where we finish the business. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're very inclusive of our new members immediately. You know, the only thing they can't do is vote. Right.
Right.
And so, you know, but we do all the business in front of them.
Things. I think
they know
that certainly
they know exactly what's going. Yeah, we do all the business in front of them. They know exactly what's going down the pike. They understand how business is done. Now, they don't get to be that, you know, that they don't get to raise their hand, but they're there for it. And sometimes they'll ask questions, you know, in lodge. Listen, I know I'm an EA, but I want to ask a question.
Would you say that the size of DC has something
to do
with it too?
I think that certainly contributes to it. I mean, DC is an outlier because of small numbers, right?
Well, in small geographical area.
Absolutely. I mean, and so we're going to be an outlier anyway. But on the flip side of that, Eric, is that we have a high transience, right? And so guys come in and leave at a super high rate, especially military guys. You just don't know where you're going to be assigned from 1 month to the next sometimes. And so even with that high transience rate, I mean, we're still, you know, we're still putting them away, which is great. It's really encouraging to me. But again, I think that's just because of the inclusiveness, right? Once we get a member, we commit to that member.
So do you think that if you were to control for the Grand Lodges that do not allow opening on,
see, there it is, right? So this is where I'm going. I don't know.
Drop?
You know, I would hope so, because I would feel really smart. But I don't know, right? I just don't know. And I in my heart of hearts, I don't think that does explain it all, because I think a lot of lodges have gone, or a lot of Grand Lodges have gone to a model where they're trying to keep their EAs in lodge more. They're not going all the way, I think, but they're doing at least something, you know, to try and engage them right away. So I don't know. I don't know if that explains it fully. And so I think that's part of what's really cool about the Conference of Grandmasters, is that I can put these people together and say, hey, you have really interesting things to tell us. You have a cool story. Let's see what we can do with this, and let's see what happens. I got an overwhelming sense, actually, at the conference, that people are done screwing around. That whole idea of, oh, I'm not going to share my numbers with you, or I'm scared of what it's really going to say about me as a Grand Lodge, and blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of that is dropping away. And I think guys are much more realistic about our position as a fraternity, you know, in society, and our membership numbers, right? We're looking at them with cold, hard facts now. We've gotten to a point in our society where, you know, analytics does rule the day. You know, the numbers you can't argue with. And so I think Grand Lodges are really starting to see that light and saying, all right, well, just run the numbers. Tell us the truth. We need to figure this out. So I walked away with a really, really positive feeling about that, actually. And so hopefully in the future, you know, there will be some real serious studies that are using big numbers in a smart, innovative way.
So let's get speculative for a second, because we are speculative Masons.
Look at
right?
that. Look at that. You just shoot that right in there.
Yeah.
You dog.
Me and my dad jokes.
You dog.
But let's get highly speculative for a second.
All right.
What's interesting to me is that
be a great name for a podcast, by the way. Keep going.
I would expect that the lower number for guys going through the traditional way could be explained another way. And I'm just curious, like if you were to speculate,
sure.
Why is it that like a 1-day class is going to mean higher retention for 3 years? For 3 years, right? It's
yeah. Sure.
I mean, it's
yeah. Well, I absolutely. So here's my thing: is that and I go back to this. I think it's because you're a full member. You walk away from that class. You've got voting power, baby. You know, you were an actual member of that lodge.
But that would explain it for like maybe the first.
Not only sure. Okay, but not just that, right? Is that these guys are busy. The guys that are choosing to do the 1-day class, I think they're given an option, right? I don't think that it's like, well, you're a 1-day class. You've signed up during our 1-day class period, so you have to be a 1-day class. I think they're making the option. I think they're given an option, like, hey, you can do this the traditional way. It takes, 3 months to a year for you to go all the way through this thing, and there's this big process. Or we could just do it in a day. It's up to you. And I think they give them the information. So I think that the people that are doing 1-day classes are choosing 1-day classes, and walking into it knowing what's going on. I think they're getting good advice.
Right. But that doesn't explain why they're staying.
It certainly could, because here's the thing, Eric, is that, like, if I'm making that choice and I'm saying, like, I want to do this because I just don't have a lot of time. I really want to be a Mason. I really want to be a part of this. The idea of how I got my foot in the door doesn't matter. Do you see what I'm saying? What matters is that you got your foot in the door.
Yeah,
and so maybe that's what it is. And they're making the right choice. They're making the right choice, Eric.
But all right. But that explains,
they were given the option.
Yeah. So that explains the process, right? In other words,
but there might be less buyer's remorse for a guy who does a 1-day class, has only invested a small amount of time at the front end of this thing, right? He gets to see all the levers that are moving afterwards, right? But the guy who goes the traditional way, it takes you 3 months to a year to figure out if you've got buyer's remorse or not.
So Joe,
there you go. Joe's
Joe
right.
says, demands nothing.
That's what I'm saying. That's absolutely right. That's the investment you've made.
Here's what I think. I think that that's the magic thing. That's the actual
is that you've made a low investment.
You've made a low investment. And so
that's right.
If you let's say that you've got a really awesome lodge, and it's funny because I remember when I was going through my degrees, and I admit, like, at the time, if I could have done a 1-day class, I probably would have. And now I'm glad I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just so, like, hell bent on getting in the room, right?
Well,
like,
sure. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I was impatient.
And
when I was doing my catechisms, right,
mm-hmm.
I was told, like, well, it's our tradition that you learn the questions and the answers. And the way that we would deliver the catechism is one of us, we'd have two guys, and one of us would start with the questions and answers, and then someone would just call out switch, and we would just switch.
Sure.
Like, we'd do that 6 or 7 times during the whole course of delivering the catechism.
Right.
And that's a lot of work. Right. And so my thinking is that if you have a guy who goes through that for, he's going to do 2 catechisms. He's going to be coming to lodge regularly.
So there's, okay, wait, but
right?
no,
and not going into the room.
Well, let me pause you there. I can't speak for Ohio. I know that they actually do something with catechism. They don't just let them off scot-free in that day. You don't just go through in the day.
I know.
And
you have to do them later.
Yeah.
But you can do them pretty much at your own pace. I mean, nobody's going to say, hey, it's been a month
right.
now,
We got
you haven't done catechism. We're going to take your membership away. They don't do that, right?
That's fair. All right. Okay.
And so
that's totally true.
So you've got this guy, and he's going through, and he's doing all the work, right? And he's studying what he needs to study, and he's asking questions, and he's having discussions, and he's spending the time at lodge. I mean, because here's the thing, like, so we'll go out after lodge for a drink,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We have dinner beforehand. We open the
mm-hmm.
lodge at, I think our lodge opens at 7, right? We'll have a meeting, and then after the meeting is over, then we go across the street to the pub for drinks and discussion. And if you're a candidate, right, you're there for that, waiting for that meeting to be over. And we also have, it's not, I wouldn't say it's like written policy, but it's like our tradition is that, guys need to come around to the lodge for a period of time before we feel like they're ready to, we're not the kind of lodge that, like, oh, you've got a pulse here. Here's an application, like that kind of thing. Like, we want people to, like, come around and
sure.
And And so you've got a guy who's now done this, right? He's been showing up for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
He's petitioned. He's gotten his EA. He's done his he's worked on his catechism. And for some of these guys, and I was one of them, until I
Sure.
kind of figured out how to learn ritual, man, it was so hard.
Mm-hmm.
It was so hard for me. Just because my brain doesn't work like that. Right.
Sure.
And,
absolutely.
And so you get a guy who does, and then he finally gets his Master Mason degree, right? Now
Mm-hmm.
he's a full on member. Now he can put the ring on. He can vote. He can do all the stuff
Right.
that they say. Oh, don't do that. Not
That's
till
right.
you're a Master Mason.
Right. Don't put those points out.
And if the experience at Lodge is crappy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If like we remember we talked with Pete Normand, and he kept talking about
Mm-hmm.
cold spaghetti dinners on a paper plate, that kind of thing.
That's exactly right.
Right? If that's your Masonic experience, then yeah, you're gonna get angry. You're gonna be like, why did I spend all that time for what? And that's what I think is explaining it.
Yeah.
Is that the investment is quite large, and if the payoff isn't there, it's worse than if you just
you're out the back door. Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
No, I'll buy that. Right. And if the
because the expectation's
payoff
been built up.
But there you go. And if the payoff isn't there, for the guy that went through the 1-day class, he might go, I'll give it a little. Let me see what happens.
Yeah.
Whereas a guy who's already invested all that time and given all that buildup is probably like, ha, 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 I hate you. I'm gone. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think about the guys.
That's terrific, Eric. Is I think that's probably a pretty realistic. It's a pretty realistic reason. I'd like to test that with the numbers, but I mean, that's pretty realistic.
So this is why, and this is something, maybe we should do this. Maybe you and I should figure this out, but there should be an exit interview. If you go NPD, the lodge secretary should call you up and give you a standardized.
Yeah. If you demit or if you withdraw from a lodge, any exit should have at least some information about why, and it should be recorded and then put in a database so that you can follow it.
Yeah.
It's that stuff is invaluable. I've argued for a long time, Eric, and I think you've heard me say this, is that Freemasonry, especially now that we're losing buildings left and right, literally there is only one thing of actual value that we own: data. That's all we have. But that data, is it worth it? Because we've got lots of it, and it's completely untapped. We just haven't.
Well, but only if we share it, and only if we make it available to people who can analyze.
There you go.
Insight.
There you go. And so if we share it, we share it with the right person, right? Who's asking the right questions and using the right tools to find the right answers. There's a lot after that, but all that data is super, super valuable that we're sitting on. And it could really, really help us if we used it correctly. So they're off soapbox. What does the Vox Populi have to say?
Well, that would be Joe Vox Populi Crociata. He says, what you're discussing.
It's always thought of Joe, the Vox Populi.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. The common man bringing it in for us.
Yeah. He says, what you're discussing is a matter of vision. Renewal, as Jason defines it, means exactly what? Did anyone at Cogmina present any vision about what Freemasonry should be in 2075? Is the vision of the craft the recreation of the mass membership organization at early 20th century?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's there yet, Joe. I think it's a terrific question. First of all, let me start at the beginning. I don't define renewal. Renewal is the name of the committee that they've kind of come up with, and it's an evolution of a committee that started in I think 2000, maybe 1999 at the turn of the century. But that committee has essentially morphed itself into sort of a membership / marketing focus for the Conference of Grandmasters. And so I don't define renewal in any way. I take no issue with the name of it, and I don't care. What's more important is what they're presenting and what they're doing today. As to vision, listen, man, I don't think there's a heck of a lot of vision in Masonry. I'm just going to say that. I did it. I said it. There it is. There's not a lot.
How dare you? How dare you,
right?
Sir?
You know, you've got a bunch of guys that are myopically focused on their 1, maybe 2 years in office. Often the plans that they've laid while they've waited for their chance to get into the Grand East. Often those plans go haywire almost immediately after sitting down in that chair, because outside forces intervene and your plans go kaput. So, you know, the best that we can hope for is that at the Conference of Grandmasters, when these guys get together, that they come together with some sort of a unified vision for things. I just don't think we're there yet. I think that, one, we finally started to hit bottom, like I mentioned before, with Grand Lodges are now very willing to be honest about where we sit membership number wise and what that lower membership number means, right? That means that we're not going to be able to afford the nice things that we once had, right? That's number one. That's surface level. And so, yes, Joe, part of it is, we want to get back to the point where we had a ton of members, because that means that now you can bump back up and we can offer better programming, better buildings, things like that, things for our members to be proud of and take home. So maybe part of it is, we need to get back to getting some numbers. We need to become a big organization. On the other side of that coin, there's a lot of people that say, listen, maybe we're just right sizing and the organization has boiled itself down. We're not that big mass membership organization. And what we are is this a group of philosophically oriented guys who are coming together to do intellectual work together, right? And that's not a mass market kind of a deal. I don't know.
Well,
I really don't.
That's
because here's the thing.
Bring up something interesting. Wait.
Right. Okay, sure.
Bring up something interesting, which is you said we're not mass market, and I was thinking as you were talking about, retail profitability, right? And
sure.
So, for years, the store that had the most sales per square foot was Tiffany.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Right. And in, I think it was 2000.
Although it's a lot like saying like, hey, saffron's more expensive than gold. Sure. By weight.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And if you look at sort of the profitability of a company, right, you can look at a company like Target, right, or
sure.
Costco, right, and they're probably making the same profit as Tiffany. But
sure.
If you took all of Tiffany's inventory, you could probably hold it in a black plastic garbage bag, right, in any given store. Whereas Costco requires a warehouse, and so there are places in the world, and you need only watch the what's that movie, Terra Masonica, right, which shows all of these different lodges and different Masonic traditions around the world, and what you see is these places where Masonry is, in some cases, persecuted, in some cases, but it's small. It's very, very small, and yet they do have a building and they do have a nice experience and stuff like that.
Sure,
but it's expensive. And
there you go.
It's like high value, high margin, high.
You're absolutely. I see where you're going with that, and you're 100% right, Eric. Yeah, I mean that might be it.
So like
but going back to what Joe said,
if we want to be the target of leisure activity, right? We can be, but we need a lot of. We're going to need a lot of mass. We're going to need a lot of one-day classes. We're going to need a lot of dues paying members.
But let's go
support
back to
those
what
movies.
Joe said. Is what Joe asked reasonable or not? And here's my argument is I don't think that's a reasonable question. Where, is there any vision for what Freemasonry is going to be in 2075? I don't think it's a reasonable question. I don't think we can reasonably expect a conference of grandmasters to come together and have any sort of vision, much less a unified vision, right? I mean, you're talking about all of North America. It's not just us. It's Canada and Mexico as well. Speaking of which, have you ever listened to the lyrics of Mexico's national anthem?
Oh,
Grim.
Mexico was
First
founded on Masonry.
First of all, no. So they play the national anthem at the beginning of this thing, right? And it's so that we all stand up and sing the Star Spangled Banner and "Oh Canada," and then they come in with Mexico. Which, listen, there's not a lot of hockey in Mexico, so I haven't heard the Mexican national anthem very much. Also, they're not winning gold medals like nobody's business in the Olympics. So, first time for me. And I was listening to it, and I'm like, huh. And I'm looking at the translation that they run a translation up on the big screens. And I'm looking at the translation. I'm like, that's not a national anthem. That's a threat. That is an absolute 100%. Come on, come for us. Come on, come get some. And it's bloody. Like they literally sing about like, we will gladly run our fields red with your blood. The foreign invaders. Yeah, I'm dead serious. Please go look up the Mexican national anthem. It's awesome. I'm sorry. I went on a tangent.
Okay.
The important thing is you've got all those people in a room. Can you reasonably expect them to have a vision, much less a unified vision? I don't think you can. You just don't. Not from a bunch of people that are placeholders. What Masonry really needs is it needs leaders who take leadership for a longer term, whether that be 10 or 15 years. And we look to those guys. That's what we need. I don't think we have that. Bottom line.
What do you mean, like professional management? Is that?
Yeah, almost, right?
Nope. I think we lost Jason's feed.
Hi.
Oh, you're back.
I'm back. Sorry. Yeah. So what I was saying is that I think it'll take, it takes a grandmaster, a certain number of years of kind of consistency, right? To really outline a vision and then work towards that vision. You just can't get that with 1 or 2 years.
Yeah. So that's a huge, you bring up that's almost a show, but.
Right. That was
like
sure.
That question, right?
But Joe brings up it is a terrific point. It really is. It's just a hard answer.
So here's my question then. Here's my question then. If that's true, and we can't rely on placeholders, as you say, to sort of establish that, who's going to do it?
I don't know. So
and the thing is like a professional manager, like hiring a professional manager, that's not going to be enough. Like they're not there to do vision. Hey, Jason, I think you need to go out and come back.
Yep, I'm in.
Oh, okay. What I was saying is that like I don't think a professional manager is equipped, right? They may not even be a Mason, right?
Right.
The people who are in the professional management. All right, so Joe has a comment that I think is
okay. Yeah, there you go.
Putting
Good.
Up here. Jason is missing the merits of forcing oneself to discuss and propose a vision. If these men constitute our leadership, the absence of any such concern is, well, concerning. Now he's proposing that we put those without the motivation to express vision 10 or 15 years at a time. Unbelievable. And I got to say, I kind of agree with him. Right?
Listen,
I think it's facile to just say, well, these guys are only in for 1 or 2 years. I think if they don't come to the chair, like with a 10 to 15 year vision, they shouldn't be in the chair. I really do.
The problem is that here's a problem, right? Is that I completely agree with that. But I think a bunch of those guys, a good handful of them are really smart guys and do come to that chair with a 10 or 15-year vision, right? Or a 20-year vision even. They're not going to get it. The reality of the situation is that you're only there for a year. You could control 1 year, and you can't even really control most of that year. So I'm talking about reality. I get where Joe is coming from and where you're coming from by saying this stuff, and I completely agree with you. What I'm saying is that reality says it ain't happening ever. Period. End of story. Even if you have a visionary, if we had Elon Musk come in and say, I will be Grand Master of whatever jurisdiction for 1 year, and I will lend my massive leadership and vision to you. Guess what? Next year, when Eric Diamond becomes Grandmaster, it's going to be different. Period. Because it can be.
Yeah, but that's okay. Like, if look, imagine for a second.
No, it's not okay because it defeats that. The question is what's the vision?
Doesn't vision matter. Is all right. Wait, no, vision is different than execution, right?
But only slightly.
Well, no. So if as a hang on, let me finish my thought here.
I'm letting you go. Go ahead.
If a grandmaster, let's say that all right, so let's go back to our Sandbox Grand Lodge, right? The Grand Lodge of Eric and Jason, right? In the Grand Lodge of Eric and Jason, if we have 5 grandmasters, each of whom have a 10 to 20, a 10 to 15 year vision, right? And they're coming to the chair with that vision. That's something that can then each time we go, right? And Illinois is unless
let's just back up for 2 seconds before. Is that vision the same?
It doesn't matter if it's the same. In fact, it's probably good if it's not. Right.
Okay, so Grandmaster A's vision, 10 to 15 years down the line, is a much smaller fraternity that is highly focused on the small members that we have with expensive dues, but robust offerings, right? Grandmaster 2 comes along and goes, no, we need members. Don't care about anything else other than members. Give them to me any way I can get them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Grandmaster's one vision is useless. It's moot, right?
No, it's not, because you then go to the the Cogmina, right?
Vision without follow through is pointless. It's
I get it,
it's mental masturbation.
No, I get it.
Right? We don't need that.
I got you.
What I'm saying is that the political reality is that it just doesn't happen. And we could have guys stand up there, and I've heard guys stand up there and give their vision for 2075. Doesn't mean anything to me. I mean, it's shooting darts in the dark because there's no follow through to that. Who's going to work towards any sort of vision at all? You get maybe a year of vision at best.
Well, as the system is designed now, maybe that's true. But I think
that's what I'm saying.
No, I'm just saying, like, I think if for example, if I were a grandmaster, right, and I had this vision, the first thing I would want to do and try to do is make sure that, I had buy-in for that vision with the other guys in the line.
Sure.
Right. Which sometimes happens. Sometimes it doesn't. Right. There's a lot of politicking and stuff like that goes on.
There is.
But at least there's a discussion about it. And at
sure.
least, if the problem is the lack of vision, right, then what you need is you need discussions about vision.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree with that as well. But but the problem is that vision, in the way that we are talking about it right now, that's an art. Right? We were talking about that before, right? But it's an art form. And the thing is, you cannot go to a conference on vision and learn how to, become a visionary.
I think that's all you can do at a conference. especially
agree with that.
Cogmina, because Cogmina, they cannot
There are a
they
lot
can't
of
do
ideas.
anything.
Okay,
Right?
so all right, so
All they
let's
can
boil
do
this
is
down, right?
recommend.
So
All they can do is
all right, absolutely. Let's boil it back down again, and let's talk about what actually happens at Cogmina then, right? And what really happens there is that little incremental changes are made. The aircraft carrier gets turned a degree at a time,
yeah.
at best.
Mhm.
But that's the way that we work. It's the nature of our it's the nature of our organization that's how it is. So the battleship this time, or the aircraft carrier that I talked about this time, that little tiny move was data and guys' willingness to really have an honest and open conversation about data,
Mhm.
and about, hey, what works best for you guys? Well, we've tried this and it doesn't work. Why? That kind of stuff is happening, and it's happening more and more and more at these conferences. There's not a lot of, at least I didn't get a lot of smoke blown up my butt about, well, we're the best jurisdiction because, we never do wrong. It was a very honest, like, oh man, we totally screwed this up. What's your experience? And, sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, but we've all walked away and we've learned something from it. And so that aircraft carrier moved an inch. That's my only defense of it. And honestly, I think that overall, I walked away from this conference with a really positive feeling, where I haven't had that in the past. But I walked away from this one with a really positive feeling, actually.
No, I think it's great. And I think the truth of the matter is that, no matter how visionary your vision is,
right.
Right. If it's not informed by data, it's not worth it. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. Right.
That's absolutely right.
It's fantasy.
Exactly. It's a successory.
I think, yeah, exactly. So I think getting to that point where we can start to, like, once you have it's funny because we have discussions about this in advertising all the time, because now we're starting to get actual big data, right?
Yeah.
And so all the agencies, because it's a disrupted industry, right? So all the agencies are like, we're data driven, right? And there's this guy who, in fact, I'm going to talk about this on the next show. I'll just do a little segment on this. So the guy's name is Rashad Tabakawala, and Rashad was he was the guy who first started the first digital agency at Leo Burnett, and he also became the CEO of a group called Starcom IP, which Starcom was the media buying agency that was spun out of Leo Burnett, and they would do like traditional media. And then when internet came out, he started like the digital version of that. And what's interesting is he's written a book, which is amazing, and I hope it's going to shake up the industry. But he talks about, like, are we relying too much on, like, are we relying on data to save us? Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Especially in a society where we're starting to be like, I don't know how comfortable I am with you people having all that data, and totally, a bit of a data backlash, right, and stuff.
Yeah.
And so what he says is that we shouldn't be driven by data. We should be informed by data, right? The poetry is still important, and he talks about that. He talks about the spreadsheet versus the story, right?
Yeah.
And how you have to if you're an ad agency.
But ad agencies have always done that, right? And that's actually, it's something that an ad agency has always been relied on for.
So truly, the history of ad agencies is that ad agencies have always been story and no data, because
I've always thought that an ad agency was always there's story, but they've always had a department that was market research, right? And they were data driven, and you would have these people who would do your market research, and they'd come to you and they'd go, "Here's some numbers. Let this inform the story that you're about to tell."
Yeah, but more often than not, that the quality of that research was crap, right? Because you're asking people, and like we know that people have a bias, right? And so people, you ask people something, and they'll tell you what they think you want to hear, or what they think makes them look good, but it doesn't really,
Right. Right.
it doesn't really make, if it's something like, yeah, I eat ice cream out of the container, while sitting in my sweatpants and weeping over my failed relationships, right? No, people aren't going to say that in a
Right.
focus group, right? You're not going to get that, right? But you
Yeah.
might get that
Yeah.
in actual
like
data, right?
I like Briars because it makes the darkness go away.
That's right.
I think that's
right.
a terrific.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a terrific campaign.
So, and I can't remember who said this. There's a famous quote where someone said, "I know 50% of my advertising is completely worthless and ineffective. I just don't know which 50%." Right. And that's right.
That's
and
great.
That's been the story of advertising for all these years. It's like basically you get a lot of creative people, and you hope that by, all the investment that you make in it, right? And this is why advertising is kind of in trouble, is because
sure,
now I can go and I can throw something kind of crappy up on Facebook, and I'll know instantly whether it's working or not. In fact, Google is closing in on something which is sort of the holy grail of marketing, called attribution, which means I can actually track you from the moment you make that Google search until you buy, and know what was the last thing you looked at before you buy. Now, turns out, and this is sort of an emerging story, turns out a lot of that's kind of bull, right?
Yeah.
But that's what the holy grail of marketing is. And and a lot of people on the creative side, right, feel like, oh my gosh, that's going to kill that's going to, right. And so I want to go back to something Joe said before that I did not post up, which is, but it speaks to sort of the story part of it, which is, do we intend to continue to be an initiatory body? Right. Cool. And so what makes this kind of thing kind of dangerous is that, okay, so now we know that one-day classes have better retention rates than doing things the traditional way. So if you're being data-driven, then the obvious solution is screw the traditional way. Let's all do one-day classes, right?
Right.
And that's not, I think, where we need to go, right?
Right.
Like that's...
No, I totally agree with that. And I think that's a slippery slope. And I think it's a terrific point. Because are we an initiatic society if it's a one day you're in? Like, is initiation a pat on the back? You know what I'm saying? Is it hey,
so as a strategist, if masonry was my client and I was a strategist, what I would say is, okay, so we know that one day class has better retention rate than the traditional, but the traditional is what's essential, what's important, right? So how do we make the essential exceed the results that a one-day class gets us?
Well, there you go.
Right. And so that's the difference between being data informed and being data driven.
Right. And I think that this is a topic that came up a lot at Co-Magna, right? But what was it's hard to do a lodge right. I mean, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I sat in on the university lodges thing. They did a presentation about that. And just talking with those guys afterwards, I was just like, listen, my experience with the university lodge that I helped make, I would love to be able to give you guys like, hey, why are we successful? Honestly, there's no silver bullet. There isn't, other than we've had a couple of guys that have worked really hard to keep that lodge going and have done the necessary work. They put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of brain power into that lodge, and they continue to do it, and they don't give up on it. And that's hard. And you can't realistically ask everybody to do that all the time. And there is no silver bullet. There's no, hey, we did this one thing and it was, there's nowhere to click the one strange thing to make your lodge super powered. It doesn't happen. I think it's a mix of everything, and that's what makes it hard. But again, that's what makes masonry so worth it and so fulfilling, is when you do get it right, it feels great. It's so satisfying, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So Abe Metz is here. He says
it's
it's
absolutely
really
right.
about providing value.
Absolutely, Abe.
Yeah, absolutely right.
100%.
Absolutely right. Well, I think it's probably a good place to end. What do you think?
Sure. I think so too. Absolutely.
I think Cogmuna sounds like it was like super interesting,
It was fun. It was really good this year.
And hopefully we'll do this. Do this every year. I mean, I
absolutely.
Some
in 2 years. So next year is Seattle, which would be great because Seattle's a great town. Year after that is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Your hometown.
I've already told members of my Grand Lodge that I do not guarantee in any way there is a higher than 0 chance that we end up in jail. But luckily I have friends. So it's going to be great. It's going to be good stuff. And actually judging by this year, hopefully
I may just go up there just to hang out. Like
you damn right you should.
Like I won't even like go into the building. I'll just sit outside and be like, hey,
absolutely,
let's go out to dinner. Let's go.
Right.
You know,
we're gonna go to some taverns. I'm gonna teach everybody how to speak Wisconsinese, and by the end of the conference, I'm gonna have everyone ending conversation with,
"Oh yeah, hey there,
hey, tell your folks I says hi." That's my goal.
Oh, that's great.
Tell your folks I says hi.
Well, listen, Abe signed up to be an executive producer, and that is
an
excellent
thanks, Abe.
transition.
Look at you, Abe.
Look at
already
that.
doing your duties as
Jeff,
executive producer.
Jeff Woosley as in Racine.
Thank you, Jeff.
Great,
Jeff. Great. Jeff, we're gonna also do a show on the difference between Fleet Farm and Fleet. It's gonna be a good day.
Yeah, so this is the point in the show where we thank our executive producers. Without you, the show doesn't happen. If you'd like to become an executive producer, make your way over to our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/xoriente, and you can do that. Again, thank you from the bottom of our heart. We've been able to solve a lot of Jason's technical problems. We're not quite there yet. We're almost
we're getting there. But a new really nice sounding mic, with all the accoutrements makes it much better. So thank you guys.
Yeah. And so, we thank you. Listen, we want to know what you think. Let us know how you find the show. If there's something you want to hear more of or less of, drop us a line at xoriente@gmail.com, or you can visit us on our Facebook page and leave a comment. We always love those. We're, if we take a week or two off, it's because we're preparing more material. And for those who've noticed that there haven't been drops in the feed yet, like if you're watching this live, that's gonna start to happen this week. It's just because of illness, we've not just had the energy to do the post-production, and
we're truthfully, we're just a mess.
It's not, and hey, listen, I want everybody, stay safe. This coronavirus thing is a
3-step process, kids. Wash your hands,
wash
your butt, wash your butt. Don't stick your fingers in your holes.
Thank you. Now we're going to have an explicit rating on our podcast.
That's a 3-step process, and that's World Health Organization.
Don't touch your.
That's the WHO.
Yeah, they say don't touch your face. Wash your hands often, and one of the things, it's interesting. This is kind of important, I think, for all Masons, because when we talk, like most of our lodges, we have a sickness and distress, and that could get pretty crazy in the next few weeks / months. So
absolutely,
keep in touch with your brothers if they're in need.
And when you're going to lodge, if you're coughing, please don't go.
Yeah, don't go if you're not feeling well. Don't go. But keep in touch with your brothers, and it's like that's what we're here to do, is look out for each other. So let's make sure that we do that during this really, really difficult time. And on that happy note, I'm going to say good night. Fiat Fox, everybody.
Good night, everybody.